Hey everybody. Um, welcome. This is actually I think it's my second or third attempt to um, to do a video on this topic. So welcome. And the one I did yesterday, it was poor lighting. I was completely grayed out, and because it was sunny. I mean, it wasn't sunny. It was raining, and it just was horrible lighting. In the meantime, I had my cat walking all over the place. And so she may pop in today, which is part of the reason why I like these little tiny screens of me. And that way she shouldn't, well, she won't interrupt with the screen share. But anyway, so if you're new to me, welcome. I appreciate you being here. If you have been with me, I really appreciate you being here. If you've not seen my last video, that's quite all right. And this is kind of like a continuation of that. Actually, it's not, I won't say it's a continuation, it's a more in-depth look at one specific thing when it comes to, well, the name of this post that you're looking at is Hormonal Changes Affecting Our Sleep. And what these are, again, I'll just, in case you haven't seen the last video, just to recap, it's a list of hormonal changes that are occurring in the system when the stress system is activated. Okay, so this is the hormonal changes that are occurring in the body when the stress mechanism is activated. And there is a stress mechanism. It's also being referred to as the stress system. All right, so stress is not this mental, emotional point of distress. Stress is actually a system. It's a system of survival. And so just to recap, for those of you who haven't seen the last one, one of the first changes that occurs is the corticotropin releasing factor stimulates the production of adrenocorticotropin hormone, which is ACTH. It also influences the production of 8-lipotropin as well as 3-endorphin. Now we know what endorphins are, right? But this is a different type of, this is a different form. Okay, so, you know, although we recognize endorphins for being that, endorphins are actually opiates. I'm going to say it that way. They affect the opiate receptors. And so if we're producing endorphins or a type of endorphin during the stress activation, then what the body is actually doing, and the endogenous opioid system, the opioid receptors, have evolved over the years. There's a history of them dating back, I think it's about 100,000 years at this point, which is something I talk about in Breaking the Cycle of Disease Management, which you can get to in two places, either through my aromagenomics program, which provides you with lifetime access, and you have everything about breaking the cycle of disease management on top of the aromagenomics method, modality, ongoing information, guidance more specifically, because as things change, as nature changes, and that's the one thing I stay on top of, there would be a lot of input as to how we would want to implement different constituent choices, but that's a whole nother video. But anyway, that's one way to get to breaking the cycle of disease management. The other is in my Circe Circle on Coffee, KO-FI, Circe Circle. Over there, I'm kind of teaching the more lighter side of aromatherapy, and that program is also available there for people who want to subscribe to that. And that's pretty much pay as you can, pay what you want over there by donation. So off of that topic, but just the point is that we're producing endorphins, and endorphins are, like I said, opiates, and these opiates are, as we know them to be, you know, they help relieve pain. Okay, they're pain relievers. So it would make sense. That's the miracle, you guys. That is the miracle of the body, because just think about it. We're stressed, and it's already producing the chemistry to kind of help keep the momentum going in the event that there is any sort of harm to the organism. Just fascinating to me. And as you can see right there, these plasma levels of these hormones actually increase nearly 5 times when the stress mechanism our stress system is activated. I'm going to skip number 2 for the time being because that's the primary focus of this topic today. Vasopressin is also involved in the activation of ACTH and slowing down fluid release. There's a decrease in gonadotropins, also known as your reproductive hormones. The stress system inhibits the thyroid stimulating hormone and lowers T3 and T4. Insulin levels go down, and then as such antagonistic hormones increase, like glucagon, which is going to lead to inflammation. Glucagon promotes the release of glucose into the bloodstream, and with lower insulin levels, blood sugar issues become a problem. So this is the reason why, and again, I talk about it in other videos, but just to kind of briefly cover, just to recap that, stress system is activated, digestion is minimized to the point where we're no longer utilizing glucose, carbohydrates, proteins, and so forth. We're not able to assimilate them. And if you want to learn more about why that's happening, that's something I actually talked about in the last video that I don't want to go into. I don't want to duplicate all the information. So I review the absolute necessary hormones that help the body actually produce the energy that's needed for metabolism and clarity, mental focus and so forth. So go check that out over there. I'll put that link in the box below so that you can just easily access that video. But like I said, for the primary focus of this video today is on number 2, which is the catecholamine production, which increases the release of dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. These are hormones that are released during emotional and physical stress, which leads to increased cardiac output, skeletal muscle blood flow, sodium retention, reduced intestinal motility, constriction of blood vessels under the skin, increased glucose, bronchial dilation, and behavioral activation. So now, as you can see, we have between the reduction of insulin and an increase of these catecholamines, you have a rise in your glucose levels. Well, of course, that's for energy, right? That's because we need that quick burst of energy. So this is the reason why glucose is not assimilated into the body when we're stressed, because glucose has many purposes in the body, part of which is to produce hormones. It is what is the word I'm looking for? It is, oh my gosh, converted. Gosh, I forgot. It's converted into other forms of sugars that have other purposes in the system. So, but in this case, when the stress system has been notified that it's necessary to be on, glucose is now being used for immediate energy release, okay, to keep us moving, to keep us adapting to the immediate circumstances, to be on guard, if you will. It's extraordinary. I'm just fascinated. Every time I even review any of this information, even if I've written it, I'm just always fascinated by it. So, but the point here, catecholamine production increases, which includes the dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Now, epinephrine and norepinephrine, along with acetylcholine, which acetylcholine is not a catecholamine, it's a different type of neurotransmitter, but that is acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter for the autonomic nervous system. The second one would be the norepinephrine, with epinephrine being kind of like a sidekick. But all of them have excitatory as well as inhibitory influences on the autonomic nervous system. Beyond that, we're looking at dopamine here. It's just amazing to me. So over the years, I've talked extensively. I have, just to kind of, as a refresher, I do have a background in counseling, coaching, specifically psychology, cognitive development, addiction, and so forth, brain development. And I just went all the way in psychology because I was wanting to understand human nature from a psychological aspect. And got into addiction. I've worked in treatment facilities as an aromatherapist, assisting those who were in recovery with essential oils. And so therefore, addiction is very near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that I've taken offense to, because I've lived my own addictions, I've, had a familial experience with addiction. I've had friends experiencing with addiction. So right now I'm using the word addiction on a very loose term, because that's just kind of how we culturally understand it. It's the name has been changed to substance abuse disorder, because addiction, by all definition, is a change to the brain structure. That particular brain structure would be the dopaminergic mesolimbic pathway, also known as the reward pathway. Now, we've stepped away from calling it addiction and calling people addicts. I don't agree with labels. I understand people's struggle, but what I'm here to prove or to demonstrate or to at least begin to open the door for discussion on is that in our training around addiction, when it comes, and by the way, that was probably the most cathartic experience I could have ever had. I mean, any kind of therapy I wasn't doing as well. I have this mind that I need to understand something. You just can't talk to me and tell me something. I will go for the information. That's the reason why I share so damn much with you guys, because I want you to have the full grasp of what, I don't want to just sit here and just spew things to you. I want you to see the picture. So I went into, that's part of the reason why I was, in treatment facilities working in there, and really wanted to understand who I was working with. And I never thought it was going to be something for my benefit as far as learning more about me. And boy, did it ever kick my ass. That's okay. So in that program, we hear an awful lot coming from different organizations throughout the United States talking about those who live with addiction or substance abuse disorder are weak. They don't have a weak foundation. They have a weak mind. There's a weakness. And if you're somebody that's never lived with it or never been around it, and you just hear things because it's being publicly spoken about, please think about that, because it's not a weakness. And I'm really glad you're here, because I think you would stand to benefit from understanding that this is truthfully a chemical disruption as a result of an active stress system. That's what this is. And I'll say more about that here in a moment. So this is not a weakness. We consider addiction a disease. And again, the only way that you can be labeled or diagnosed with the disease of addiction is for somebody to go in and do imaging of your brain and confirm that that reward pathway of yours has been altered. And what that means by altered is that there are additional dopamine receptors that are laid down. Okay, so we recognize that cocaine does it, alcohol does it, cigarettes do it, so we have these substances that we're aware of. And caffeine is one of them. Okay, so here's an interesting thought. FDA labels caffeine as a dietary supplement, and it's safe, generally regarded as safe. Okay, so it can be added to foods, and you would be surprised at the number of foods that it gets added to. Things like sunflower seeds and waffles and syrup. Okay, besides your already well-known energy drinks and so forth. Yeah, it's in foods like that, and they can put it in that if and they don't even have to put it on the label if in fact it meets the requirement of a certain concentration. Once, as long as it doesn't go above that concentration, it can remain off the label. That's the sad truth about the FDA. Now, or I should say a sad fact about the FDA. On the other hand, the DSM-5. The DSM-5 is the diagnostic tool that psychologists and psychiatrists use to while working with their clients. And in the DSM-5, it is listed as, caffeine is listed as an addictive substance. And in fact, it's considered the most addictive substance on the planet. we've got approximately 90% of the world population consuming caffeine on a daily basis, probably all of us at this point, if it's being added to foods and we're not even aware of it. And caffeine is one of those substances that does also, in fact, influence changes within the mesolimbic dopaminergic pathway. Okay. Yeah. And what's more, through the work that I've been doing on my book, The Alchemy of Rest, I think in the last video I talked about it, calling it the alchemy of sleep. Rest is more where I'm going with this, because sleep is it's a physical state, but I'm talking, I mean, yeah, there's a distinct difference between sleeping and resting. And so that's the reason for the name change in the book. And that might even change yet with the direction this is going, which is very, very exciting. But in the meantime, the research for that introduced me to the fact that cortisol also influences changes within that reward pathway. So now, cortisol. And we have basically a population of people living with an active stress system. Okay, so are you telling me that infants and toddlers and the unborn are, you know, mentally and emotionally stressing? Yes and no. It's been proven that the unborn child is picking up on the parents or any of the, especially the mother, but anybody else that's involved, you know, the stress within relationships affects the mother clearly, and that is going to affect the child, although the child's not in there ruminating about what they're going to do for the rest of their life. What are they going to grow up to be like? How are they going? How many children do they want? We know that that's not happening. So that level of mental and emotional distress, no. But emotional distress based on what's being sourced through the mother, absolutely. Additionally, there's environmental distress. And in the sense that beyond emotional environment, there is the external environment of chemicals, okay? And I'm not sitting here saying that we are victims of this environment. Unless we do something about it, we are. You know, so the one way that, I mean, before I even sat down to do this video today, I was trying to come up with a title that would be catchy enough. And one of the things that I'm very well aware of is if we have the ability to do anything, we do have the ability to control our health. And it does appear as if our health is becoming out of control. And that's simply because we're trying too hard to control everything else around us. And sorry, I'm stumbling, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Our own conventional model, you know, the contemporary medicine actually seeks to control the body. And we're seeking to control the body because we don't believe the body's capable. Well, what's happening is the body's perfectly capable. We have a system that's operating on high alert. That would be your stress system. So all the other systems kind of go by the wayside. They're under the protective guise of the stress system, but they're not really fully thriving. They're not fully operational because there's a lot of inflammation that's happening as a means of kind of like creating a protective barrier. So that said, our unborn, our young, are just as susceptible to this stress system being activated as an adult is. And once we get to being the adult, and we've had years of this, of being exposed to this and not taking control of our health. And I don't mean controlling it with medication, okay? There's a distinct difference between attempting to fixating on something that's broken and bad, or understanding that the system is doing a damn good job of keeping us above ground. And so our job is to tap in to its wisdom and work with it. That is what aromagenomics actually teaches. It's a hands-off form of self-control. And thereby you have the ability to prevent and at the very least offset a lot of the things that are beginning to degenerate. And sleep is paramount for all of us. Rest is a better way, I meant to say rest. Rest is paramount for all of us. So yes, our children are susceptible to this. Yes, this is ongoing. And as a matter of fact, as I mentioned earlier, the digestive system slows down. Well, part of that is the fact that acetylcholine is not being used in the digestive process. Okay, it's been used to keep the autonomic nervous system activated. Therefore, we're no longer producing, beneficial amounts of hydrochloric acid, which begins the breakdown of the macronutrients. And then what's more is the hydrochloric acid also sterilizes the food before it enters the bowels, therefore now helping to regulate gut flora. Okay, so when this isn't happening, stress will fuck up your microbiome. Okay, and what's more important to that is that the gut, the GI tract, has more nerve endings in it than the spine. And so it's picking up everything. There's neurotransmitters, taking place in there for motility. I mean, we just were looking at this here. Yeah, I mean, right there, you got your catecholamines with reduced intestinal motility. Okay, that tells you right there, because acetylcholine and serotonin are necessary for improving intestinal motility. But now what you have is 3 other catecholamines that have taken charge. So the serotonin levels will go down, and the acetylcholine levels are down, and therefore your bowels become sluggish. And on top of all of that, you have a tendency possibly to have more cluster headaches and or migraines, and definitely IBS or some form of IBS and other digestive discomforts. So and this is beginning at a very early age, and that is the reason why I'm here, is to begin introducing this information, not as a means of just telling you what to do, like I said, but to actually underscore what's really going on. You don't have to remember all of this, but just understand that we have the ability to control this, okay? This is a system, just like our respiratory system is a system, okay? But we still have the ability to regulate our breath. It's a fact. And so if we have the ability to regulate our breath, we have the ability to regulate our stress. And I'm not talking about going out and just running on the treadmill 60 to 90 minutes a day to kind of, I mean, it's good for you to be physically active without question, because it helps to alleviate the mental and emotional distress, but too much is going to cause the exact opposite. And one of the things that I've talked about in my writing and so forth, I mean, it's one thing to meditate and to practice yoga, but if you can't use it and take it off the mat and use it throughout your day, it's pretty much only beneficial in the time that you're practicing it, and that's it. So we have to bring this into the bigger picture. I have also talked about for years, okay, again, that I feel like we're all coming into this world already stressed. My opinion is that reward pathway is being altered prior to birth. Again, they're not imaging people's brains on a regular basis. So we're just left to diagnose people with a substance abuse disorder when it finally manifests into something, because why addiction is, and eating disorders fall into this category of addiction, or clearly it's not a substance, but it's addictive behavior. It is about control. It's about controlling your emotions. It's about controlling your relationships. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, if we want to feel like we belong somewhere, we'll get involved with things that will kind of bring us closer to people. So it is about control. And what I'm saying is we're continually trying to control our external world, when now it's time to control our inner world. So in theory, we're born predisposed to addictive behaviors. Depending on how we're taught will determine our choices. And so some people don't get involved in illicit drugs and alcohol and cigarette smoking. They don't get involved, they may get into excessive exercise, they may get into video gaming. There's all kinds of ways that this can show up in life, all right? Not that any of it's bad, okay? This is not that statement. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm saying these are examples of how addictive behavior will show up in life, and it's all represented. It represents the stress that's in our system, or the stress system per se, that is on high alert. It explains why we have horrific relationships, abusive relationships that the people don't leave, they stay in it. Because we're, how many of us have ever heard of somebody being in an abusive relationship and we wonder why they're still there? They don't want to be beaten on, they don't want to be yelled at, they don't want any of the negative stuff, but it's this right here. And somebody said to me this morning, well, how this doesn't, this kind of behavior, whether you're a bulimic or you're in an abusive relationship, that doesn't seem much of a reward. It's not the external activity. Okay, that's not the reward. It's the perception of the reward. And the perception of the reward stimulates the production of dopamine. Dopamine is the reward. And once that dopamine level has been peaked, has measured up, then everything kind of begins to subside. So again, in theory, I feel like the majority of the world is addicted to stress. We've already been able to prove that cortisol does create the production of more dopamine receptors. That's been stated. Obviously, there's other things that do it. And if we're producing extra dopamine through all of this, it stands to reason. I mean, and again, this isn't a defective system. Okay, there's a purpose to this. As you can see, higher levels of dopamine and epinephrine and norepinephrine lead to increased cardiac output. Okay, your heart starts to race more. Okay, you need to have the blood circulating. You need to have the skeletal muscle blood flowing. You hold on to the sodium so that you can retain fluid, so that you have, again, that's your protection mechanism. Sodium and fluid, I mean, that's like a cushion. Sodium has a number of purposes in the body. You're not really wanting to use the restroom. You're not even thinking about using the restroom. So your bowel movements slow down. The blood vessels constrict under the skin because again, think about that. It's less vulnerable at that point. You're producing more glucose or releasing more glucose for energy purposes. The lungs change, the respiration changes, your behaviors change. This is for your own safety. This is an adaptability mechanism. And so therefore, I'm here to say that addiction or addictive type behaviors are in fact the result of the stress system. All of our health issues are the result of the stress system. If you're walking around and unable to shed fat from your body and you're always upset because you have excess fat, it's because your stress system is activated. If you have a child with autism or you yourself are living with autism, this is a sign of an activated stress system. It's not a defective system at all. It is just a system that is responding to the world as it is. And your body has adapted, or your child's body has adapted accordingly. If you have diabetes, well, you can clearly see why you have diabetes, and again, it's not, I understand, look, I say that and I can hear other people talking to me, and I don't mean that literally, but I mean, conversations that I've had historically, it's kind of like the question about what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? I was listening to somebody else earlier today that was talking about how more and more young people are coming up with fertility issues, and they're surprised at that. I'm not surprised at that. I'm not surprised that we have childhood diabetes. I'm not surprised that we have diabetes at all. And again, is it what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, in my opinion, I don't know which one's the chicken or the egg, but in my opinion, it's not bad behavior. It's not bad habits. We live in a world with shit for food, meaning processed food and refined foods. We live in a highly stressed world, highly emotionally volatile world, inflammatory world. This is the world that we live in. And our coping mechanisms, I mean, our stress systems are being activated from the moment that basically we're being conceived. It's no wonder we're making decisions that way. And this doesn't create, this is not an excuse for not regulating yourself. Okay, self-regulation is necessary in order to gain control of your health. So up until this point, we've been none the wiser. And it's essential to recognize the fact that we have this world that is an inflammatory world, like I said, emotionally volatile, and it's creating volatility and inflammation within our systems. Therefore, it's changing everything about our neurochemistry as a means of surviving and staying above ground. In the process of all of that, until we recognize that, we will continue to make decisions that undermine our functional well-being. And so I'm here to say that we have the ability to shift this. We have the environment that we do. We have the population and the culture that we do. But we don't have to emotionally tap into that. We can distance ourselves from it, you know, and I don't want to get into anything preachy there, but we have the ability to self-regulate and recognize that shit, this is what's happening to me, and taking baby steps, you know, taking it baby. I mean, I actually had something I wanted to do on a Facebook group called Balanced Wellness, and I'm still up for that. I haven't had anybody really say they wanted to sign on, but I think that would be a really good group for support of how do we self-regulate. No talk about essential oils, none of that, but just how do we self-regulate? How can we help one another to self-regulate? So these are some options. Again, the inclusion of essential oils, in my opinion, is exceptional. Yeah, I'm just stopping. I just had a fleeting thought. But the inclusion of essential oils is, in my opinion, necessary, because they do in fact act like our hormones. They can de-escalate the activity of the stress system. They can help us regulate the way we think, the way we feel. I mean, I know when I sit here and write, if I'm starting to have any sort of nervousness about my writing, I have paid attention to my behaviors and will get up and use oils instead. And within about 15 to 20 minutes, I can find myself kind of like settled back into my chair and more focused on what I'm doing. So I do highly recommend oils on a daily basis, and learning how to integrate them into your personal care. That's something that we talk about in aromagenomics. And yes, I do get into the epigenetics of it all, because that's the reason why it's called aromagenomics, because there's epigenetics involved with this, and how your epigenome functions is going to be different than somebody else's. And so although I have all of this information here about the hormones that are changing and offsetting our ability to sleep and rest, well, it changes. I mean, this is the reason why it says it can increase to nearly 5 times, because again, one person's system is one person's system. So yeah, that's the reason why using oils is very, very beneficial. So I welcome you to visit me, like I said, on Circe's Circle, and we can just have a lighthearted, fun time over there talking magic and oils and that kind of thing. Or we can meet up in aromagenomics and really get into the nitty gritty of using oils on a daily basis with, like I said, that provides you with lifetime access. And you have me for as long as I'm around to guide you through formulations and selections and so forth. And then again, if you're interested in balanced wellness, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I would love to hear from you. I think it would be a really great group of accountability and accountability. I'm going to say momentum. focus, remaining, focused on our commitment to being well. But really kind of helping, being a community of support, if that makes any sense. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you checking this out, and I look forward to your questions. By all means, let me know if you have any questions, and I will be back very soon. Have a good day.